Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and we got a bit of an emergency video to make here. I wasn't going to do this video because I just did a video looking at Japan's current metagame right now, but I think we got to talk about this, and that is, of course, Budew. Now, this new Budew card's coming out within Prismatic Evolutions. It's a pretty good card, but it has completely shifted Japan's metagame. Like, this card is apparently in nearly 50% of the decks that are being played. I mean, according to Hegster here, so far, almost 50% inclusion rate in all decks within the top 16 of 56 recorded tournaments are playing a Budew in their deck. This card has completely taken over Japan's metagame, and in my opinion, is going to change the way the game is played. This arguably is the most impactful card within Prismatic Evolutions. I mean, we got these brand new Evolution EXs, this new Regigigas, yet Budew is going to be the one card that I think actually makes the meta the most different. It's kind of crazy how impactful this Budew is going to be. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about Budew. We're going to look at Japan's metagame and just look at all the decks playing Budew right now, why they're playing Budew. We're going to talk about, is Budew good for the game? A bit of a discussion going here. I want to know in the comments below, do you think this new Budew is going to be good for the game? I've already seen a ton of takes on Twitter the past 24 hours talking about why Budew is good for the game, why it's going to help the metagame. Because I'm going to be honest with you, we are in a bit of a hostile, aggressive meta right now, for sure, where games can literally be decided on your opponent's second or first turn of the game. That's how fast the meta is right now. And Budew is going to come along and potentially slow down the game a little bit and allow decks to actually have room to breathe, which is really cool. So we're going to talk about Budew. We're going to look at some deck lists in Japan with Budew. And if you're new here to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 19,000 subs. And once again, let me know in the comments what you think of Budew. So, like I said, Budew is a 30 HP basic Pokemon, same vein as Cleffa, where, like, it's just a little Pokemon you want to put into play via Buddy Poffin. You use it as a utility Pokemon to help you set up in the same way Cleffa's played. Cleffa's seen play within both Charizard and Regidrago, where now Budew is going to do something similar, but instead of you drawing up the 7, you're going to be item locking and slowing down your opponent. Now, like I said, in Hegster's tweet here, he said that the item locking Budew from Prismatic Evolutions released and is legal for tournament in Japan. It is so far has seen almost 50% inclusion in all decks, like I said, which is just crazy. That is a lot of Budew. So we're going to look here at the decks playing a Budew. We're going to go over to Japan's City Leagues here. We're going to go click on a couple tournaments. We're going to click on some of the decks and just see if they're playing Budew. So we got this first tournament here. I'm pretty sure this Ancient Box and Lugia deck are not going to be playing Budew. Gardevoir here will 100% be playing Budew, though. Yeah, we do have this Gardevoir here in the top 8 playing Budew. Now, one of the things that makes Budew so good is how helpful it's going to be within a deck like Gardevoir. Now, Gardevoir is already a pretty slow deck, and it already uses slow Pokemon, or Pokemon that slow down the game, I should say, like the Klefki and the Fluttermane. I actually don't know how fast Klefki and Fluttermane actually are in the Pokemon video games. I haven't really played the games in a while, but I do know that they are there to slow the game down a little bit. And we do have the Budew in the deck now alongside it. Now, Gardevoir usually is very powerful when it gets to set up, right? The problem is, when you're playing against a deck like Regidrago or Miraidon or Raging Bolt, sometimes they just overrun you before you're able to establish a good enough board where it's really hard to lose. Where now, with Budew, you know, against Regidrago, you go second, and you just hit him with the Itchy Pollen, you item lock him, and they can't energy switch to the Regidrago. This buys you time. This means that they're not going to be getting turn 2 Phantom Dive or turn 2 Kyurem, right? Technically, if they go first and they find enough, pardon me, they find enough energy switches before it's even your first turn, then technically they can get turn 2 Phantom Dive. But you gotta remember, they're gonna be item locked. They cannot play Ultra Ball, E-Switch, Nest Ball. Pretty good stuff. And then, of course, really good in matchups like Charizard, where you're going to item lock and slow him down. Really, like Gardevoir at the end of the day, if it can set up a decent enough board presence, usually it's really difficult to beat. Even a deck like Miraidon or Lost Box, which are also very aggressive decks towards Gardevoir, usually Gardevoir doesn't have a good game plan against turn 2 Iron Hands, right? Your opponent gets turn 2 hands against Gardevoir. Their best plan is to usually try to put something in the active spot with a Bravery Charm on it, hope you don't have a boss, or they try to get turn 2 Gardevoir into play, which, unless they TM Evo'd or Rare Candied, they can't get the Gardevoir EX out. You're probably going to take 4 prizes with 1 Iron Hands, and usually at that point, the game is just pretty much over. So, Budew can slow down those turbo decks from, you know, like using Iron Hands EX, which is what makes it so good. So that's probably not the greatest example, but we got the second tournament here, which was won by Archaladon Dialga, was not playing a Budew in there. This Goldengo deck was also not playing Budew. Lugia was not playing Budew. He was playing the new Gigas, though, which looks pretty good. Terapagos here, or Cloth anyway, sorry. It was not Terapagos, it was Cloth. This Cloth deck is playing a Budew. A deck that's already supposed to be arguably the fastest deck in the format with how it operates. It can literally win the game before your opponent even gets to have a turn. And it already is going to be incorporating Budew in the deck. Also, in certain scenarios where item locking is going to be beneficial for the deck. Keep in mind, though, Budew with Poison combo actually is kind of crazy. You can do a lot of damage with a Binding Mochi Budew. Now, to be fair, your Budew does have, 30 HP, so it's going to get KO'd by Poison pretty easily, so you got to probably switch card it out of the active spot before it gets KO'd, but theoretically, Binding Mochi Budew isn't a bad combo either. You can do, like, 80 damage item lock, which is kind of crazy, for sure. Dragapult here is also playing Budew. Another deck that really benefits from having a couple turns to set up is Dragapult. Dragapult is a very powerful deck when it gets to play the game, but when your opponent gets turned to Phantom Dive or turned to Kyurem or turn on Iron Hands, usually Dragapult just kind of folds sometimes and just doesn't have enough steam. They have to draw the nuts basically to keep up. Where now they have Budew in the deck, where a slow deck like Dragapult, usually if you let Dragapult establish a really good board presence with Dracloaks and Dragapult, it's really tough to beat them because Phantom Dive is a very powerful attack that can really demolish your board. Dragapult also has a ton of HP. Budew allows Dragapult to set up, and that's very important. You can go item lock with Budew, sit back for a couple turns, and build up your Dracloaks, build up your Dragapults. Honestly, by the time the Budew gets KO'd, you might even have 2 Dragapults almost ready to attack, which at that point is enough probably to win the game, which is what makes the Budew so powerful within the Dragapult deck. This other Dragapult list here also is playing a Budew, also playing Klefki, so really trying to slow the game down by playing 2 Klefkis and 2 Budews to really slow down your opponent. We got another Guardia list here, also obviously playing Budew. Just again, like I said, it's already a deck that plays these Pokemon meant to slow the game down, and this deck will also be playing the Budew. Regidrago also plays Budew. Now, this one's interesting, because Regidrago plays Cleffa. Cleffa's a very good card in Drago. A lot of the time, Drago wins games because you have a Cleffa in the active spot and your opponent has no way to take a 2-prize turn. But with Budew in the deck, it's going to be even harder to play around that strategy now, because instead of sitting there and going Cleffa, you can now go Budew and slow down your opponent. I'm not going to lie, usually if you don't get to set up fast enough versus Regidrago, usually the game does end, or at the very least, like, it's very hard to win a match. Like, your win percentage goes down to, like, 20% if you have, like, 1 or 2 turns where you do nothing against Regidrago, and they get to just set up against you. Like, it's actually really tough to beat Regidrago. Regidrago is a very powerful and aggressive deck because of how many attacking options it has. And like I said, if Budew can buy you time with Regidrago against your opponent, and you don't get to play the game versus Regidrago before they set up, like, turn to attack, like, you're probably just going to lose the game. Like, Drago is that good of a deck. Usually it ends the game on the spot, especially if they save Legacy Star. So Budew is another card that might replace Cleffa within a deck like Regidrago. So now we're seeing Drago, Dragapult, Gardevoir, Cloth all playing Budew in the deck, which is legit kind of crazy. Then we got Tropico's Dusknoir here, also playing a Budew. It's a bit of a different list, though. We don't see any Bouffalant or Fan Rotoms or Noctowls, but it is still, like, an aggressive deck, right? It's another deck that abuses Dusknoir. And, if you can Budew your opponent and build up Dusknoir, like, you got to think about it. If you're playing against a Stage 2 deck, for example, and you Budew them, okay, they don't get to play Rare Candy. So those Charmanders and Pidgeys and Dreepies are not evolving, so you can effectively just set up a bunch of Dusknoirs and just wipe their board because you item locked them and they were not able to play the game. Budew, Dusknoir, honestly, might be a bit of a toxic combo. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if that's a very healthy combo for the game. I think Budew's good for the game, but I don't know. The idea of Budew, Dusknoir seems kind of sus. I think that might be a little too broken. Just the fact that you can't evolve any of your Pokemon because you're item locked, while your opponent can just sit there and just load up a bunch of Dusknoirs and play and just demolish your board before you even get a chance to do anything because you're item locked, doesn't seem very healthy for the game. I mean, Dusknoir, like I said, is just, we've talked about this before. I think Dusknoir is one of the worst cards ever printed, and it's definitely a card that I despise. I think it's a very poorly designed card, and I think that there's potentially a bit of an OP combo with Budew, Dusknoir. That's probably what this deck is trying to do. It's not really a Terapagos deck where it's more like a Budew, Dusknoir deck that happens to play Terapagos. Because, I mean, if you can set up Pidgeot, double Dusknoir under item, like in your item locking your opponent, and they cannot evolve their Pokemon or do anything, and you just board wipe them with Dusknoir because they're item locked, that just, to me, gives me more reason for Pokemon to just ban Dusknoir, because just that should not be allowed. But this deck definitely seems like it could be a pretty broken deck in the future. Then we go to this next tourney here. The winning Charizard deck did not play a Budew in it. Okay, that's surprising. We got another Cloth deck here, which also played 2 Budew. So yeah, even these aggressive decks can play Budew, because Budew can be an aggressive card, because you can pair it with Binding Mochi. You can item lock, so you're effectively doing 50 with item lock, plus the poison. You're doing 80 damage item lock with Budew, effectively, with Binding Mochi, Sneasler, Brew, Bonnet. That's kind of crazy. 80 damage item lock is kind of broken, I'm not going to lie. So, I mean, Budew's even going to find a home as its own, like, turbo attacker, which is kind of crazy. Archaladon. All right, here we go. We got an Archaladon deck playing a Budew. Look at that. Another deck in this tournament playing a Budew. This makes sense because Archaladon Dialga, if it can usually set up a really quick Star Chronos, kind of in the same way you play the Dusknoir Budew deck, you're going Budew, item lock your opponent, prevent them from setting up, and then you can just sweep their board with a Dialga V-Star, which seems kind of broken. We got a Lost Box deck also playing a Budew. I mean, yo, even the deck, arguably this is probably the one deck in the format that loses to Budew the most. Like, okay, yeah, these stage 2 decks don't like Budew, but at the very least you have like Rotom to like instant charge and stuff before, you know, usually as long as you get a Rotom in play before they item lock you, you can probably at least still do something, kind of. But with Lost Box does not like Budew. This honestly could be the final nail in the coffin for Lost Box. Klefki and Fluttermane are really bad for Lost Box too. Klefki especially can be annoying for Lost Box. But usually Klefki doesn't do anything against Lost Box. Lost Box usually gets to eventually deal with the Klefki, because Klefki is a pretty bad Pokemon versus Lost Box. Budew item locks. Item locking against Lost Box is really good, because a good majority of the deck revolves around items. So this could be the final nail in the coffin for Lost Box. If Budew actually ends up seeing this much amount of play, I actually don't think Lost Box is going to be a very playable deck at all. Not only if Regidrago is still going to exist in the format, but if Budew is just a thing, I think Lost Box could just die, because like, that seems really bad for Lost Box, obviously. We got another Cloth deck playing a Budew, so that's another deck using a Budew here. We got a Dragapult Xatu deck also playing Budew. This is a deck that actually also has incorporated Klefki in the past, where like you put a Klefki in the active, you slow down your opponent, and you build up your Zatus and Dragapults via TM Evo. And this deck also is kind of doing something similar, but this time they have the Budew in the deck to item lock. So kind of like the Dragapult Dusknoir deck, usually Budew can buy you time to build up your Dragapult. This is like the one benefit of Budew being in the format, is that it gets to slow down a lot of the turbo decks so that these stage 2 decks actually get to play the game. Like, stage 2s are really good in theory, but that format being too fast sometimes just means these decks never really get to do anything, where now with Budew, they actually can buy a few turns to set up, which is really cool. We got another Dragapult deck here also playing 2 Budew. Out of curiosity, is this Entei deck? Oh my god, even the Entei Ogerpon deck, which, by the way, I'm working on a video on this deck, by the way. Keep your eye for that. Even this deck is playing Budew. That's kind of crazy. This deck is like basically just a turbo basic, 2-price deck. And even that, put a Budew in the deck. Call it a day. Kind of crazy. All right. Move on to the next tournament. We're not going to go through every tournament. We're going to look at mostly decks, though. Okay, the Greninja deck, surprisingly, is not playing a Budew. I don't think we're going to, these Roy Moon decks are not playing Budew. Gardevoir, obviously, we're going to see a Budew in the deck, the savior of the format. I got a Charizard deck here, not playing Budew. Okay, I don't know why the Charizard's not playing Budew. We got a Kingdra Palkia deck. This is interesting. And look at that. You know what? It's also playing a Budew in the deck. That's interesting. This actually did decent in a City League. Let's see. We got Dragapult Thorns. This is a tech. Actually, this deck could probably play Budew. I mean, you're already playing Iron Thorns, which is pretty good. Arguably better than Budew in some situations, but your opponent gets to play items. Denying your opponent items seems pretty good. Now, the Gardevoir, obviously, with the Budew in the deck. And then we got Pokemon Dusknoir also playing Budew. This one did make top 8, but this one still plays a Budew. Like, even this, it's still a Dusknoir deck. So, Budew, Dusknoir, like I said, seems like it's going to be a pretty insane combo for sure. Moving on to this tournament here. Dragapult deck that won the tournament also played Budew. Was able to beat a Lugia in the finals here. Lugia's not going to play Budew, but Lugia does gain Regigigas, which is going to be huge for the deck. We got this Drago deck also playing Budew. So it looks like the Regidragos, from what we've seen so far, they are going to be swapping out the Cleffa in favor of a Budew. We got another Terapagos Cloth deck here, also playing the Budew. Look at that. Ooh, Ditto Budew is actually kind of clever. Again, the problem with Budew is it's low HP. It's kind of annoying with the poison damage with Binding Mochi. Where now if you can go Ditto, you can use Ditto to copy Budew, and you have more HP. That seems actually kind of broken, I'm not going to lie. Raging Bolt, not playing Budew. Wouldn't be surprised if Raging Bolt didn't play Budew. Miraidon's obviously not going to be playing Budew. I don't think these other turbo decks are going to play Budew. Surprisingly, these Charizard lists are not playing the Budew, which is kind of crazy. Lost Tina is playing Budew. Oh my god. You know what's crazy when even Lost Own Giratina is starting to put Budew in their deck. Holy moly. All right. Next tournament here. Yep, Dragapult Pidgeot playing a Budew. It seems kind of good. If you get, usually like these stage 2 decks, when they get Pidgeot out, they're like really, really effective. So being able to Budew your opponent buys you time to set up Pidgeot Dragapult easily, which is kind of crazy. Because it's really tough to beat these stage 2 decks when they set up the double stage 2 combo, and the Budew makes it super easy to do that. Another Gardevoir, also playing Budew, playing an Iron Crown, which is kind of crazy too. Another Dragapult, playing Budew in the deck. Miraidon's not going to be playing Budew. I'm just out of curiosity. We got an Archaludon not playing Budew. We got a Quad Thorns. Obviously, they're not going to play Budew in the deck either. All right, we'll go through a couple more tournaments here real quick. Gardevoir, winning list, played a Budew. This Cloth deck, played a Budew. It's kind of crazy. See here, Archaludon. No Budew in that deck. Okay. Lugia's obviously not going to play Budew. I mean, you could. I mean, theoretically, if you want to set up double Archeops, you could Budew your opponent. Doesn't seem terrible. Does not seem bad at all. Sarah Ledge playing Budew. Oh my gosh, even Sarah Ledge is going to be playing Budew. That makes sense because Sarah Ledge, if it sets up a ton of energy really quickly, it just sweeps through your opponent. A bit easier to do that when you just item lock your opponent, slow him down, where you get to kind of load up your discard with energy. So it makes sense to maybe play a Budew within even like a deck like Sarah Ledge. I'm surprised the Charizard list not playing Budew. That's crazy. Dialga Matang's even playing Budew. Oh my gosh. They even got the new Gigas in the deck too. Dialga Matang with Gigas seems kind of broken. Yo, Gigas with Matang seems kind of insane the more I think about it. But we're not here to talk about Gigas. We're here to talk about Budew, which is even in the Dialga V-Star Matang deck. Which, like I said, if you can Budew, slow down your opponent, and then sweep him with the Dialga, it seems kind of cool. Sarah Ledge, once again, even playing the Budew within the deck. I guess another thing to note is a deck like Goldango is not going to like Budew. Because, like, Goldango usually, like, they'll be able to probably KO Budew if they just find, like, 2 energy, obviously. But they're going to struggle to find energy when they're item locked. I guess they have Cypher Maniac, which they can use to try to find the energy out of the deck. Pow's obviously not going to be playing Budew. Sarah Ledge, playing Budew. Yeah, even the Sarah Ledge list here has a Budew. There's no way, okay, I was like, there's no way there's going to be a Raging Bolt of Budew, right? That would just be absurd. Now, the Dragapult Budew. Is Charizard playing Budew? Yeah, there we go. All right, we got Charizard list with a Budew. This seems like a no-brainer. Within a Charizard deck for sure. I'm surprised those other Charizard lists were not playing a Budew in it. It's like literally a no-brainer. All right, anyways, we've looked at a good sample of a decent amount of decks playing Budew right now. There's probably going to be more Budew decks here to look at. If you want to kind of go through the page, I'll link it in the description below. If you want to go look at the other deck lists, they're probably all going to be using the Budew. But there you go. Budew is seeing a ton of play within Japan right now, and it genuinely could change the format because it just denies these items. Switch Cart, Mirage Gate, Nest Ball, Buddy Buddy Poffin, Rare Candy, Electric Generator, Energy Switch, all completely shut off by this Budew. This card might save the format, or it might make the format worse. I think the worst thing Budew's going to probably do is that it's going to be a little too good with Dusknoir. I think that might just be a little bit of a toxic deck. I don't like the idea of Budew Dusknoir at all. Dusknoir is just a poorly designed card. I don't think Pokemon really thought ahead that much when they were building or designing Budew. They're probably just like, they probably didn't realize that Dusknoir might be a little too good with Budew, but it is what it is. Anyways, yeah, Budew is making a massive splash within Japan's metagame, and I expect the same thing will happen when Prismatic Evolutions comes out. I don't know what the first Prismatic Evolutions legal tourney is. I don't think it's San Antonio. All right, so I had to make sure I got it to EUIC real quick here, but yes, I do think that Budew is good for the game. Ultimately, I think it's a good card to have in the format. It'll be annoying to get item locked, obviously, and not be able to play the game. Like, it's not going to be fun when that does happen, but I think it is a necessary card to have in this super fast format we're in. I really do think that the game is a little too fast right now. I think that there's too many aggressive decks that really just punish you for having a slow setup. Never before in the TCG, I feel like, have you been punished as bad as right now if you ever brick. Like, if you're bricking or you just have a slow turn 1 and your opponent finds more searchable cards than you do, you probably just lose. Usually games can get decided on the second or third turn of the match. It's just kind of how it is right now within the TCG. And I do think that Budew is going to be good because now at least you get to slow down your opponent and you get to buy some time while you get to hopefully slowly set up your board. It's going to help the stage 2 decks out a lot, which I think is necessary. I think the only problematic combo is Budew with Dusknoir. I think that's a little too strong. I think Budew Dusknoir is probably going to be a bit of a problem. Like I said, I mean, if they just ban Dusknoir, all these problems would go away, but they're probably not going to ban Dusknoir, even though I think they should. But yes, I think Budew is healthy game design. I think rotation will also, help slow down the game too, alongside Budew. Rotation is probably going to be in the end of March. Since we got a release date for our next set after Prismatic Evolutions, which it looks like, yeah, March will be rotation time. So we'll do a little bit more of rotation content later. Until they like officially announce it or something is when I'll probably make more videos talking about rotation. It's a bit too early right now. Still speculation, but yeah, I think Budew's going to be good for the game, and I'm happy that this card is coming out to help hopefully save the format and, hopefully slow down the game a little bit and make these super aggressive turbo decks that rely on Energy Switch and all these like generator cards, like all these different turbo cards. Hopefully the game being slowed down is going to be good, and I think that Budew is a much needed card for the format. Let me know what you think of Budew down below. Do you think it's good for the game? Let me know what you think, and I'll see you on another video here very soon. I'm going to do some Toronto content on the channel coming up, so definitely stay tuned for that here, and I'll catch you all in another video. Bye-bye.